On today's episode of Dollars and Cents, we're going to teach you how to talk to your kids about finances, what ages to start at, and you're going to get some real life stories from two mothers and their experiences raising their kids and teaching them about how to be financially savvy. Let's go ahead and get into it. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Dollars and Cents, Hapo Community Credit Union's financial literacy podcast. It happens to be April at the moment of recording this, and April is Kids Financial Literacy Month. So today we are going to talk about some early education with children and with finance. Today, coming back to the podcast, one of our favorite guests, Kandy, former co-host. Welcome back.
Thank
now
you.
the Community Relations Director here at Hapo, as well as my next door neighbor in our offices here, Annie, our marketing manager here at Hapo. More importantly, both parents. And since we are talking about children's financial education, early ages, we figured what better than a financial education expert as well as two mothers to speak to everything about bringing your kids up and making sure that they become certified public accountants. No, but have a solid financial foundation to begin from. So let's get started. Why is this important? The crux of the entire month.
Yeah, awesome. And I have quite the interesting spectrum because I have a little one that's 7 years old and then an older one that's 18 years old. So I have a wide base to cover there.
Also have had a chance to potentially correct any other or adjust the plan from the first round.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Annie yesterday about it and just kind of like trying to find ways to, teach our kids better ways and hopefully maybe reversing some things, but.
And I have a bit of the earlier side. I have a 3-year-old and then a 7-year-old. So yesterday when Kandy and I were chatting, we had a lot in common with the 7-year-old and all.
Of course. Yeah.
Those are the best, the fun ones.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Not picking favorite children, just favorite ages. In all of this, so you've been through this, you're going through this now, you've been through this and going through this again or still. Yep. How do you guys go about this? How intentionally do you go about this with your children? And then second question, how did you think you were going to go about it versus how you actually did? Because we all know that parenting is a lot of planning ahead and then throwing the plan out and doing whatever you can to get through, right?
Exactly. I mean, it really is. I was saying to Kandy, it's about creating these like micro habits. So with the 3-year-old, it's about giving him options, and it's starting kind of small with a smaller progression, and then with my 7-year-old, she can kind of grasp some of the money concepts. And so it's kind of just building on that. And, whether at the grocery store or even at home, kind of, doing a comparison of different things and why they might cost a bit more. So it's kind of just building on that foundation as they're growing.
Yeah. And looking for those moments, where it's like relevant and right there and then, where you can use that as a teaching opportunity if you're at the grocery store, and just finding ways to make it fun and entertaining to them, because you can't necessarily sit them down and just be like, we're going to cover, budgeting in the next 30 minutes.
They're not going to want to do that. I even tried it last night.
Just an experiment to see how it was going to go.
Had no idea.
Did you sit them down with our episode with Marcelo talking about all of the different budgeting topics? Because honestly, I felt that Marcelo did a fantastic job going over that. Might still be a little highbrow for the 7-year-olds. Just throwing that out there. You talk about finding those moments. How often do you think they're listening when you're not finding those moments? When you're just talking about things, they're overhearing it. People talk about kids being sponges. They're just soaking up whatever's out there. So how much of it has to be a regular commitment to being intentional with your language?
There is so much observation going on. And that's even one of kind of, as I reflect back, as I was coming on this episode, I thought about all the moments growing up. And it was always like, if I was in a department store with my mom or in the grocery store, in all these different scenarios where it was options that were being presented. And I kind of saw how she would react or my dad would react. Mm-hmm. And kind of carrying that now through with my own kids, and providing the options and allowing them to see just in the little moments. And they can be intentional, but a lot of them just are happening. But you're, like you said, they're sponges. So taking some conversations off, like, with your spouse, taking them,
out to a different room
because, they're little rabbit ears and they'll hear everything.
Yeah. And even in those like really early stages, even under the age of 7, that's really actually research shows that a lot of kids adopt their money habits mostly by the age of 7, which is wild to think about. So we really must be intentional in what we say, because we don't want to, set them up for failure. And there's going to be lots of examples that we'll talk about later, and how we can be very just selective with our language and our choices.
Okay.
Those conversations.
I think that transitions us pretty solidly into when and how. You mentioned by age 7. So are we getting our favorite finance audiobooks and playing them while the child is in the womb?
Oh, I wish.
Oh, man, is there any wiggle room with that 7-year-old age?
I don't know. I think that we can still recover a little bit maybe on some of those things, bad habits maybe. I know that even within HAPO, we actually, before, this was years ago, would go into classroom settings where we really had resources and educational content for ages K through 12. And we had to put in a lot of research to make sure that we were picking the right things that would be enticing, to these littles. So one fun way that we found for the little ones, like pre-K, is actually through reading and through finding books. And now I wish I would have remembered to bring some of the books that we have down in the basement, some good old Bernstein Bears books, and just different kinds of just colorful illustrations and ways to tie in money. That's a really fun way to do it. And maybe tying in an active like some sort of activity, maybe a scavenger hunt. And in fact, that's something that we did very early on. This was years ago, where we brought in a group of preschoolers, and we read a book to them, and we did a scavenger hunt actually at one of the branches.
Okay.
And it was the most fun ever.
That's so
These
fun.
kids loved it. They got to learn about banking also in a fun way, and got a fun story. So that's an example of for very early ages, and how you can get
much
them
more interactive, a bit more activity based, but while they're applying these things during that activity, the seeds are being planted.
Yeah. And just in different ways that they don't know, but they are, and they're picking them up and hopefully grasping them.
And I feel really inspired by this, because I think the games my kids would be very receptive to the board games. And we just, honestly, this is a real mom truth moment. We haven't done too many, money types of games. So, kind of maybe
haven't broken out Monopoly yet.
I haven't. We have not. I know you said that you have with your daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, funny that you say that. Yeah, because I remember actually
it's a very long game. Okay, also like a 3-hour game for like a 7-year-old. They could probably hang, but that's a long game.
And classic Monopoly, not like one of the fun themed ones, you know. But yeah, not long ago, actually, we were playing a game with my 7-year-old and my husband, and she just wanted to stack up the cash. She wanted all of our money. So then we had to teach her, well, this is how you make more money. You can use your money to buy some of these properties, and you'll get rent. And we had to just explain it a couple times, and she caught on, because then all of a sudden she had a stack of cards and properties, and before you knew it, she wiped us clean.
Oh gosh.
It was great. So that's a great way to show them investing.
That actually is a really great, that sounds like a great way. I should try that with Mark. I think she would enjoy it.
What other board games out there kind of teach these type of concepts? Obviously, we don't need to go the whole real estate tycoon route that Monopoly can drive.
But we were talking earlier, the game of life.
Indeed, yeah. That was another classic board game where you got a career and a family, and then progressed through the board game itself, different life events happening. Yeah. And I don't remember, and maybe this is kind of the point, the victory condition for the game of life. Yeah. I think you literally just played through the game to see where everything took you.
Yeah, I haven't played it in such a long time, so that's why I ordered it. We're going to give it a shot, so I will report back. Maybe we'll have it in the show notes or something.
We'll have a follow-up.
So beyond activities, and you mentioned that was kind of pre-K, where would you go next as the kids are aging up and kind of getting a little bit more beyond that?
Yeah, so I would say maybe something super simple, maybe even that group a little bit older, just like a flashcard game of like wants and needs. Okay. I know it sounds super simple and basic, but really truly just helping them identify, and they choose like, okay, what do you consider a need, or a want.
I will 100% say that I know some adults who could utilize that type of a game right now. Knowing the difference between I want this and I need this versus I might want a new iPhone, but do I need to spend that much money on getting one?
Yeah.
Some of those type of things. But in this particular case, that is a good foundational thing to evaluate. Hey, do you need this or do you want this?
Yeah, correct. And then that could later evolve into maybe a lesson in opportunity costs and explaining how that works between two wants.
Okay.
You know, because kids want everything. You take them to the store. I want that, mommy. I want that. And yeah, we can't do that. So,
I mean, and that kind of brings you into some of the ideals behind the budgeting episodes that we have done. Budgeting for what you need first, and then making sure that you are saving for that want and saying, okay, you maybe want this right now, but we haven't done anything to make that accessible. So if you really want it, let's start doing X, Y, and Z to save up for it so that we can come back and get it next time. And then maybe by the time you get back there, they want something different. Then you can start that whole thing all over again and not have to buy them the thing.
And that's funny you mentioned that. That's exactly what I asked my daughter last night. I asked her, is there anything you want to save for? And she's like, no. And so it's also kind of the motivation. I think it also goes back to the kid.
Yeah.
Even in my 3-year-old, he seems much more motivated and interested. Now, not to say my daughter isn't, she certainly is, but maybe the motivation isn't there as much. But yeah, it is just kind of interesting, you know, creating those, the concepts around money and, you know, the values they place on it.
Yeah, that's definitely the key, is finding that individual kid's motivation, because for some it might be an item, for some it actually might be even just like in a piggy bank, seeing it grow, or like in a jar, you know, seeing just like their savings accumulate. So I think that would be probably a good way to get them motivated and get them to
all right. Now,
move.
Maybe this is playing a little bit of a devil's advocate here, not being a parent myself. Is it an appropriate thing to do to build a motivation by withholding something from the child and saying, hey, if you want this, here's what we're going to do to earn it. I know that you could have just had it, but I'm going to withhold this from you. So now you actually have something that you want to drive towards. Is that a little bit too manipulative?
No, I should do it more. I mean, you know, it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
I think there is, you know, go ahead.
No. I mean, it just like depends on what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't get lunch this week.
Right.
No, like a toy, something along those lines.
Yeah.
If there's a material thing, obviously at the store is a great moment to begin that one. But knowing that maybe they have a thing that you could have just 100% gotten for them to build that motivation.
Yeah. And to your point, you know, you can kind of give them some ideas of, you know, what would be some things around the house that would motivate you to, you know, so that you could purchase this stuffed animal or whatever it is. Kandy and I were chatting. I don't do allowance. I perhaps will at some point, but it's kind of an expectation in the house. You know, the bed needs to be made, like the room picked up, and certainly there's lots of those kind of reminders. But you know, I think if there's an item that my child really wants, and then we could kind of talk about, you know, what are some ways for her to, you know, make the money, to her and it really.
And it's funny because yesterday I mentioned to Annie that my little girl will just kind of randomly, and maybe it's because she's bored, I'm not sure, she'll come up to me and say, Mommy, can I go sweep or can I go vacuum, but I want $1? Can I do some chores for you? But she'll charge me, and she'll go and tally it up, $1. And she did that actually not long ago, but I didn't physically pay her, and she remembered yesterday out of
all the days, of course.
I was like, oh, perfect.
Yep.
There you go.
She brought it up and was like, wait a minute, you haven't paid me, and I have this ice cream day thing coming up at school, but you haven't paid me. I'm like, you're right.
This is a young entrepreneur on the rise. She has seen a need in the household for sweeping, has a marketable skill, and is now following up on the invoices. I think you've got something that you can build on there. Now it'll just be a question of going back to our entrepreneurial episode and deciding, is this a niche that she's filling, or is this a job of love that she wants to go out and do this thing? Granted, that particular episode, we were talking about professional wrestlers as well as house cleaning and other things, but who knows? Maybe you've got a young luchador in your future as well.
No, we'll see. Fast forward 10 years from now. We'll find out.
So that does bring up another question. At what point in time is it good to, or is it advised to start balancing work and money together, such as instead of maybe an allowance, a chore list of you make your bed, you get $1, you load the dishwasher, here's $5, or whatever those chores or tasks are throughout the week, to where now it's, hey, you didn't do that. Oh, I had to do it. So you don't get paid for it. I get paid for it. When is that a good time, or is that the type of thing that would work for most kids?
I would say, honestly, as they get older, they're going to want more expensive things. So that is a good opportunity for then us to propose that and just like find ways for them to earn more money so that they can pay for it themselves. Because
also I think my guess would be that you don't want the 3-year-old loading the dishwasher.
Yeah.
I don't know. He would probably do a pretty okay job.
I don't know if my husband to load the dishwasher.
Right,
exactly. Step aside.
But no, I agree. I feel like as my children get older, especially the 7-year-old, some of these money concepts are starting to click. So I think that's when I'll see a bit more of a shift of, she might want to earn something, really work to earn something, and instilling some of those practices.
With, say, an allowance, you haven't been doing one. No. Is there a negative to doing that? Is it just, hey, here's free money, and now you don't earn that? Kind of the task situation that we were talking about, or maybe the opposite side of that. Is it particularly a negative to provide that, or is just having that cash an opportunity to educate a little bit more in, say, budgeting and how they deal with their allowance and what they can do with that?
That's a tough one. And it's funny because my oldest will actually here and there will say, well, so-and-so gets an allowance of this much and my daughter doesn't get an allowance. Well, she also works. So, I mean,
yeah,
really. And, I pay for certain things. So it just really comes down to the family, their circumstances, their values. There's just so many factors that play into that where there really is no right or wrong. It just depends on what's best for that particular family and situation, and also the character of the child, right? Because we want to set them up for success. So we want to make sure that we're not overdoing it, that we're balancing that and considering all of those things when deciding if we want to do an allowance or not. It's a tough one.
I was going to say, similar to a budget where you want to go back and reevaluate how that's working, take a look at an allowance situation, give it some time, evaluate, is it working correctly? Are we building good or bad habits with this? And then adjust from there.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think one of the instant, almost like negative connotations that gets tied to an allowance is that, it's like an entitlement thing, which again, it depends on the family
It's
situation.
all relative to our own kind of situation. Yeah. What's going on?
Well, as well as the framework of it. Like, hey, if I'm going to give you an allowance, I'm not going to buy you that Lego set. You need to budget for that Lego set. And now we're utilizing the allowance to create a budgeting opportunity to teach them more about the responsibility, how to handle their own funds, as opposed to here's your allowance and I'm going to buy you that thing. Now it's just, silver platter type of a situation potentially. Yeah. So again, evaluating, making sure that it works for the kid, making sure that it works for the family.
Yeah, for the family and individual kids. It's really seems like even just in this trajectory of looking at both of my kids, like I said, I think my 3-year-old could be a bit more motivated by an allowance type, whereas, my daughter might not be as much. So it is kind of a balance in that.
Well, there's an interesting question then. In a family unit, how easy or difficult would it be to utilize 2 separate modes? Oh, gosh. One kid's getting an allowance, another one isn't. I feel like that's a weird concept to try and handle.
Yes. And then I'll throw this other factor in. You have a spouse possibly who's also was raised with different money values, and so you're throwing that in. I know that's kind of a separate, but it kind of plays only sort
a bit. Because if I feel like that's dad said no, so I'm going to ask mom type of a scenario where kids will 100% play mom against dad or one or the other. And over time, I know for a fact that I did, they'll figure out who's going to be the better opportunity to ask this question versus this other one. And in a money situation, that's almost certainly going to be a situation as well.
Or they hustle both the parents and get an allowance out of both.
Well, let me ask you, Kandy, so with
savvy.
with your two daughters, you've been at this a bit longer than me. Do you feel like you apply the same kind of money beliefs to both of them? You know what I mean? Like,
because there's such a big gap, it's really tough. But I must say that just the experience that I've gained with my oldest is really making me think a little deeper on the ways I want to do things with my younger one. So it's helpful.
True. Yeah.
It's making me slow down a little bit. Yeah.
All right. So in this, how slowly or quickly should we be shifting topics with kids as they age so as not to overwhelm them, but also to not miss the opportunities as they continue?
Yeah. So the way like we did it back when we were more in the schools, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, is we would just kind of ban them kind of like they do, in the schools. And we would make all the content just kind of like, there was like a range where it was like K through 4 and just kind of like shift in that way.
Okay.
Where it was just, it wasn't like every year, like there was like constant or just like all this stuff being thrown at them, where it was more like of a gradual change.
Okay.
So just introducing a little bit more once you hit maybe 4th grade and then introduce it that way.
Okay.
And is that the age where you feel like it clicks for kids? 7, 8, 9?
About, yeah.
Where they really understand the value of money and
for the most
habits.
part. And again, remember that by that age, by age 7, they already have their mind
formed.
made up already.
Yeah.
So
and
that's very
again, that oftentimes is built around the family environment, the healthy money habits that mom and dad are showing, or that both moms or both dads or whoever involved are showing in their life because they're watching. They're always watching.
They're always watching.
Yeah, they're right there.
Again, it's all like the little micro habits that you kind of just build off of. I know earlier I said, creating the options, but like, so with my son, he's like I was saying, he's younger. It's just kind of giving him an option. Do you want to wear these pants or these pants? And then eventually he'll just choose. And like I was saying, building on that. I gave the example, like when we're at the grocery store, looking at different food products. Why is the olive oil $30 and the pack of fruit snacks $3? And having that discussion with my 7-year-old, she can understand, as the process for which you make, the olive oil, you have to smash the olives and talking kind of in some of that, kid language, but she gets it then. She gets why that might be a bit more expensive. So kind of all these little micro moments,
but
habits.
You're not quite into the point of why is this olive oil 35 and this olive oil is 20.
Right, exactly. Well, because it's made from one varietal.
We're not quite getting into the I want fruit snacks. We have fruit snacks at home, and the fruit snacks at home are something completely different.
Right. Kirkland brand versus, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The other
Gushers, fruit snacks. That 100%. There
Gushers,
we go.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so funny. Every time we go on trips, I always pack a bunch of snacks that no one's ever going to eat. And why? Because my girls say there's better snacks on the plane. There's better snacks at the gas station, of course. So they don't think about those things. So it's kind of funny.
When you're talking to your kids, you mentioned using kind of their language to get the point across with the olive oil and not necessarily going into manufacturing processes, but using their language. Have you found that there's any particular things that you should or shouldn't be saying and how they respond to that?
Well, one of them for sure, and I've read about this, is not, using language that might scare them. So, we can't afford that. That's too expensive. That's too expensive. Creating kind of this scarcity you don't want to necessarily do with kids. And so there's other ways to say those kind of things, like we'll look at that for our budget, next week, if it's a grocery item. So there are ways to kind of tailor it so it's a little bit softer, because certainly you don't want to scare kids, because like we were talking about, they're sponges, so they'll soak that up and they'll remember for the next time. And so that's some of the language.
Or saying like we can buy that, but then that means we can't buy that. Right. What do you think? And kind of just letting them think about that. I think that's a lot of power there, because then they feel involved and included, and like their voice matters, and that's huge.
And it's also the decision-making process of, do you want this or this? And then potentially having to talk them down off of the Gushers cliff again. With the, obviously, I want the fruit snacks right now. It almost goes back a little bit to the marshmallow conversation that we had the last time you were on, with that immediate versus delayed gratification of trying to kind of bring that to them and be like, hey, we could do that, but then you're going to miss out on this every day for the rest of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. And a concept like that will also like trickle into other habits and other things that will impact them in life and can set them up for success if done the right way.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this being a way to avoid kind of those negative comments, and shape better relationship with money and with finance, not instilling any sort of shame or fear like, hey, we can't afford that, like this, there's something wrong with us. We didn't budget for that, so maybe we can do that next time, kind of changes some of that attitude that they may have.
Right, and getting them involved in that process too. You know, my kids, they know I kind of meal prep or, you know, plan for groceries on Sundays. So I ask them, hey guys, you know, what do you want to include? And, you know, for the most part, it happens all on Sunday, and there's maybe a few things here and there, but really planning for that week. And then next week when it rolls around, if something comes up that week, I'll share with them, hey, we'll just include it, you know, for next week, and kind of keep it within that budget. So keeping them really involved in all that as well.
Yeah, something that I've learned to do very fast is when we're out on vacation, you know, of course, kids are just like curious and finding all these things they want to buy and asking for everything. So one thing that I started doing with my little girl is I told her, you get one thing, which now actually I learned yesterday that I should set also a limit because when I told her that the last time, it backfired on me. She said she wanted the whole store.
And then they kind of get smart with their words. So with their own language.
Yeah. And she actually made a funny comeback. I wish I could do it, and I wish I could remember it, but for next time. But yeah, no, that's really important. And also helping them feel like they're not being told no all the time. And it just really makes them think about it. So now it's when she does ask for something, it's like, are you really sure that that's what you want? Which is okay, but just want to make sure because we're going to go to 3 other stores.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I'm willing to come back to this one if after 3 stores you decide this is the thing that you really want.
Yeah.
But if we get this now, nothing in those other stores is going to be there. Teachable moment to a point of delayed gratification again. And also the routine schedule type of a thing, which I'm sure will ingrain more of a planning ahead. This is what we do. It's on a schedule. It's on a routine, regular type of stuff. You had mentioned earlier, Kandy, about having a bunch of different resources. We've talked about board games, books, other items. Tell you what we'll do for all the listeners out there, we'll put together a blog post that has a kind of a list of some of the items that we've used in financial education here that they can work with. You can go out to hapo.org. The very bottom of the homepage, there is a listing of our podcast episodes as well as our blog posts. And more often than not, we'll have a link to some resources from these episodes. We're definitely going to put this one out there for everybody as well. We'll get a list of those, some of those great stories and different board games. Maybe we'll post Annie's report back on the game of life.
I feel like we maybe need to do a reel on it.
That's a possibility.
Let's get a reel on that.
Sounds like fun.
So I've got a bit of a thing that you guys didn't plan for. We're going to do a couple of rapid fire questions here.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to get an answer from each of you, and we're going to kind of go through this and see what we've got. What is one money lesson you wish you had learned earlier?
You had actually like a good example yesterday of a good thing that you learned
that
set you up for success with savings.
Yeah. Well, so for me, I would say I'm trying to say it because I feel like I learned this early, but for so many students today, they have opportunities on social media to kind of learn about investing. And that's one thing that, I didn't learn much of. However, with a slight caveat, after college, when I got my first job, my dad said to me, okay, you have a job, you got a job now. You need to invest in your 401k.
Yep.
And it was a set it and forget it. And truthfully, guys, I didn't do much with it or know what was really going on for probably a good 7 years until I really started learning about it. But it was money that essentially, I didn't miss because I never had it. And so that's something that
Out
really
of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. Set it and forget it. And, I feel like that's really set me up. Just that one quick money lesson early on. And it's helped really for.
And statistically, there's a lot of people out there that do not take advantage of their 401k matching opportunities with their employers, and they absolutely should be right out of the gate. I agree 100% with that.
But I think definitely with like I was saying, though, with students, though, they have so many opportunities now, early on with social media to kind of learn a bit more about that. Whereas, I wasn't learning too much about it, but that quick money lesson early on was very helpful.
Yeah, I was so actually fortunate very early on to just hear from my mom, and she heard it from friends, which was also very fortunate, that you must take good care of your credit, set up awesome credit, and take really good care of it, which really worked out very well for her and for me. And then it just so happened that very early on in my career, I started working at Hapo. So then I was just, that whole environment was around me. So that really helped with everything else.
All right.
But not everybody, works at a financial institution. So,
So, quick answer on this one. Allowance, yes, no, or it depends. We're not going to get into the answer. Just which one? Kandy?
Depends.
Annie?
I'll say no.
I was going to say, because you're not running one yet, but you might change that answer here eventually. What is the best way to teach a kid about saving?
Letting them know that money doesn't grow on trees, the classic saying.
Okay.
That there is a limit and that we have to be very careful in how we use our money, because we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we can't pay our bills and cover the things that are actual needs, not just wants.
Yeah. To kind of add to that, again, it's all like these small teachable moments. My daughter, she's asked, is a car more expensive than a house? And it's like, well, what do you think? Like, how, it depends, right? It depends on the type of car, I suppose, and the house, But so it's just, again, it's kind of those like small, micro teachable moments.
Okay. Favorite financial book, show, or podcast? We're going to exclude this one just so I don't feel bad later.
Dollars and cents.
Yeah. Number one. Let's see. So it's not really directly related to money. My favorite book overall, just because I still feel like it's relevant, and I actually mentioned this to another colleague here, is Atomic Habits.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a great,
so powerful.
Yeah, that's a very powerful book. That's a great book.
Yeah.
All right. How about one thing you bought that was worth 100% of every penny you spent on it?
Ooh. Let's see. 100%.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't say my dupe jewelry because I don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
Ooh, let's see. 100% worth.
I feel like this type of question goes back to a lot of your personal value on things.
My education.
Oh, there you go.
100%. So worth it. I really use a lot of the things that I learned even till this day.
Well, honestly, I feel like everything that I purchase nowadays is very like thoughtful. It's not on like, overspending on clothes or anything like that. It's very thoughtful. So I would say just what I'm purchasing now. It's very intentional.
All right, I'm going to throw mine out. I'm just going to say it was my Traeger.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spend a lot of time hanging out on my deck with my Traeger.
I know. Do we see different answers probably
food
from men and women? Probably a bit.
My guess is it's going to be different across the board because it's going to be what you value as a person. Because we could all go and spend money on my education. I appreciate my education a lot. And I do think that it was worth every penny. But again, I feel like it's one of those things that was a long time ago and my parents paid for it. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Love you. But it is worth 100%. But again, like my house, my car, all of those things, it's just going to come down to what you value. A lot of the times I value my time with friends and family. Cooking is one of those things that I do with all those people. Therefore, I appreciate what I put into those things probably a little bit more than other things that I've done. Personal value.
Right.
Yeah.
Biggest money myth parents need to stop believing.
We can't afford it. Stop saying we can't afford it.
I think that's a good one.
I mean, yeah, it's so dangerous.
Now, the myth, not that we can't afford it, because if the kid comes asking for like a Bugatti or something, I mean, that might be a legitimate answer. But the statement of we can't afford it on, say, a Lego set or something, that's mostly just coming across as an excuse.
Right.
All right. Thank you guys for hitting us with the rapid fire or slightly extended answer version of those questions. I feel like there's a lot of things, each of those questions we could have gone down a rabbit hole talking about the different values coming out of that. Let's go ahead and get one final tip from each of you for parents out there or educators in general talking to kids about money. Kandy, let's start with you.
Okay. I was just going to give a tip, but I'm also going to give a little story behind this one.
Okay.
And as to why. So when my little girl was 5 years old, her favorite place is Target. And every time we would go, of course, she would go down every aisle and ask for everything. And I had to just give her a budget that day. And the item that she really wanted was a little bit over the budget that I gave her. So then I thought, I'll just teach her about interest right here.
Okay.
Right? And yeah, it was backfired badly. So I told her, I will let you borrow $5, but you need to pay me back $6 when you get home, because that's how interest works. That's called interest, and try to introduce that. And she just threw a fit, started crying. I was like, never mind, forget it.
You know what? I actually think I had the same moment at Target with my daughter too. I was like, well, if you don't spend that, I'll add on a couple dollars for next time, and no. It didn't work.
Yeah.
A little too early for that lesson.
Timing was a little off there, but with that, be patient. I definitely had to be patient, and also just very intentional with the language and also with the timing.
Okay.
Yeah. And to add to that, I would just say, give yourself grace as a parent. You're going to say the wrong thing, and you have a chance to recover. So, you have a chance to change your language and go back, but, and use some better statement the next time, but give yourself some grace. Okay.
Being intentional, knowing that there's teachable moments, knowing that.
And we all have good intentions. That's the thing. All of us have parents. We all have the best intentions for our family and for our kids. And so give yourself some grace when you're going through this.
They're going to learn their habits early, but they're not necessarily written in stone. We can all change our habits over time. Nothing that you do is completely permanent in this particular situation. So being able to then come back, and maybe later on in life, it might be a little bit harder if they're ingrained and they have been for a while, but being intentional, taking those moments and building upon that slowly, introducing these things, starting the conversation at any age is worthwhile.
100%.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, ladies, thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Dollars and Cents, Hapo Community Credit Union's Financial Literacy Podcast. Till next time.